I'm not a lawyer, not a lawman. I'm just John Q. Citizen. But I've got enough common sense to know that there's something wrong with the criminal justice system when a man spends 33 years on death row without ever getting a new trial, despite the overwhelming accumulation of new evidence since he was convicted. I want to try to explain to you the case of William Thomas Zeigler, who's been on Florida's death row for all those years, in very simple terms, because I truly believe that once you grasp just how much this case is based on bias on the part of powerful people and their inability to admit their mistakes, you will come to realize, as I do, that what happened to Tommy Zeigler could happen to any one of us. There are four very simple and easy to understand facts that demand a new trial in this case. First, the trial judge, this man, Maurice Paul, had a conflict of interest with Tommy because Judge Paul, a sitting circuit court judge, and Tommy Zeigler had been opposing character witnesses in the case of a black friend of Tommy's in August of 1975. Judge Paul's side lost, and it was very embarrassing to Judge Paul, who had put his reputation on the line against a private citizen, Tommy Zeigler. Second, the prosecutor, Bob Egan, hid important exculpatory evidence for 13 years, and by the time it was discovered by Tommy's lawyers, the courts wouldn't allow it to be heard because of the statute of limitations had expired. You see, the courts don't seem to care much for common sense. Third, this man, Edward Williams, had a murder weapon in his possession and told the incredible story that Tommy had given him that gun after he tried to shoot him with it, but the gun failed to fire because it was empty. Mr. Egan chose to believe a man with a murder weapon in his possession instead of believing Tommy, who was one of the victims shot through the stomach during the crime. You see, if Tommy Zeigler had died along with 4 other people in that furniture store, Edward Williams would have been the only person who could have been convicted of the crime. But Egan had already decided that Tommy was guilty, and he did not want to consider any evidence to the contrary. Fourth, the DNA that was finally analyzed in 2003 proved that Egan, the prosecutor, was lying when he told the jury that the blood on this T-shirt belonged to Tommy Zeigler's father-in-law, who was also killed that night. In fact, this blood belonged to Charlie Mays, another dead man at the scene, who was killed by his Confederates after he was wounded in a fight to the death with Tommy in the dark store. Those 4 facts alone should have gotten Mr. Zeigler a new trial years ago. Part of the reason that the law has failed Tommy Zeigler is the fact that these 2 men, Judge Paul and Bob Egan, are still in power today after 30 years and can influence appeals in this case that should have gotten Zeigler a new trial based on common sense and simple justice. Now I'd like to give you an alternative theory of what happened in Mr. Zeigler's furniture store that night and why it happened. And I want to emphasize that this theory is based on all the evidence available today. It is a theory more to be believed than the theory of the prosecution. And I say again, the prosecution merely had a theory of why they thought Tommy Zeigler was the killer. And it was a theory based on just one man's testimony that he had been given the gun by Tommy Zeigler, and the blood evidence that basically was misinterpreted by this man, Detective Don Fry. So here are the facts based on all the evidence. Tommy and his wife Eunice owned a very successful furniture store in Winter Garden. They were well off, and they each had $500,000 worth of life insurance, which they felt would be needed to pay estate taxes if either of them should die. Now I'm ending this now, and we'll pick it up in a few minutes so that this will not be quite as long, and because I need a glass of water.